He came to her doorstep soaked in blood and rain, a king stripped of his throne, his eyes burning with secrets and sorrow. She should have turned him away, should have feared the danger that followed him, but something ancient, something primal in her soul whispered, "Protect him." And in that moment, as thunder split the night, she didn't know the wounded stranger she sheltered would be the one to shatter every wall she'd ever built, and challenge her freedom, her heart, and the destiny written in the stars. Hello, Moonlight family. Welcome back to Moonlight Romance Stories. If you're new here, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more epic stories filled with betrayal, power, and transformation. And to all my loyal viewers, thank you for always lighting up the Moonlight world with your support. The rain had a temper that night. It didn't fall. It attacked. Each drop slammed against the window panes of Arya's cottage like a warning she didn't understand. She sat by the crackling fire, a shawl around her shoulders, her pen still against the page of her worn-out journal. She had come here to forget the world, the betrayals, the heartbreak, the endless cycle of promises that turned to ash. But that night, the world came knocking. 3 knocks. Slow, firm, dangerous. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Her pulse quickened. No one ever came this far into the forest. No one dared. The storm howled, as though it was trying to drown the sound out. But the knocking came again, harder this time. She stood, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at her to stay away from the door. Yet curiosity, or maybe fate, dragged her closer. When she opened it, the wind nearly tore it off its hinges, and standing there was a man unlike any she had ever seen. Tall, soaked to the bone, his cloak clung to muscles carved like the gods themselves had sculpted him out of shadow. His eyes, golden, bright even in the storm, met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I seek shelter," he said, his voice low, commanding, and edged with exhaustion. "Just for the night." Something inside her trembled. Every instinct screamed danger, but behind his power, there was pain, something broken. Arya hesitated, her fingers gripping the doorframe. "There's no inn here," she said softly. "You're miles from the nearest town." "I know." His gaze didn't waver. "That's why I came here." She blinked. "You came for me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He didn't answer, only stepped forward, and for a moment, lightning lit his face. There was blood on his jaw, claw marks down his neck. Her heart stopped. "You're hurt." He caught her wrist gently, stopping her before she could move closer. His touch was warm, too warm, and she felt power hum beneath his skin. "No doctors, no hospitals," he murmured. "They would track me." "They?" she whispered. His gaze flicked to the forest. Hunters, enemies of the crown. Something about the word crown froze her in place. The aura around him, the authority, the dominance, it wasn't imagined. He wasn't just some lost traveler. The air thickened, the fire behind her crackling louder, as though the cottage itself could feel the shift in energy. "You should not have opened that door, Arya." Her name on his tongue sent a shiver down her spine. "How? Do you know my name?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped inside. The air around him charged with dominance and danger. Water dripped from his cloak onto her floor, mingling with the scent of pine and rain. She moved back instinctively, eyes on him. He studied the small cottage, then turned to her, and for a moment his expression softened. "You're not afraid," he murmured. "Most people would have slammed the door by now." She folded her arms. "I've faced worse things than storms and strangers." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I doubt that." Something in his tone, a quiet authority that wasn't arrogance but inevitability, made her chest tighten. He sank into the wooden chair near the fire, groaning quietly as the warmth touched him. She saw the blood on his arm again and grabbed a cloth from the shelf. "Sit still," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. You're bleeding all over my floor." He didn't argue. He only watched her, eyes following every careful motion as she cleaned the wound. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was electric. When she finally looked up, their faces were close. Too close. Her breath hitched. His eyes burned like sunlight trapped in amber. "Who are you?" she whispered. He hesitated, then said softly, "A man with too many enemies, and not enough time." The firelight danced across his features, highlighting the faint mark etched near his collarbone, a royal insignia. Her breath caught again. She knew that symbol. Everyone did. The mark of the Alpha King of the Northlands. Her hands froze. You're... Yes, he interrupted quietly. And I'm not here by choice. The thunder roared as if the heavens themselves reacted to his words. "They betrayed me, Arya," he said, voice low, trembling between fury and heartbreak. "My own blood. They think I'm dead." Her pulse thundered in her ears. She should have been terrified. A fugitive king in her home, hunted, wounded, unpredictable. But instead, she felt something else. Pity, curiosity, and something deeper. Something that scared her more than any danger outside. Desire. "You can stay," she said finally, almost whispering. "Until morning." He looked up sharply, eyes locking onto hers like he could read the fear and confusion swirling within. "If you let me stay," he said softly, "you'll never be free of me." She blinked, her throat tight. "What does that mean?" He stood, the power in his movement undeniable. Slowly he stepped toward her, close enough for her to feel the heat of his body. "It means," he murmured, his voice a dangerous promise, "that the storm outside is nothing compared to what's coming." Lightning flashed, bright, white, blinding. The door burst open behind him from the wind's force, and for an instant, Arya thought she saw shadows move in the trees beyond. Enemies. She turned to warn him, but he was already facing the storm, eyes glowing with fierce, otherworldly light. "They've found me," he said. "Stay behind me, Arya." The storm screamed, the fire roared, and in that instant she realized the night she opened her door to the Alpha King was the night her quiet life would end forever. The storm didn't end with the night. It deepened, wind lashing against the trees like an ancient beast, rain beating against the roof of Arya's cottage as though trying to warn her that danger was not yet past. Kaelin stood near the doorway, back straight, shoulders broad, eyes burning gold through the shadows. She could feel the energy rolling off him, raw, alive, commanding. The air itself seemed to obey him. Outside, faint voices echoed between thunderclaps, shouts in the distance, steel clashing, then silence. Arya clutched the edge of her table, heart racing. "They're close," she whispered. Kaelin's jaw tightened. Not close enough. He stepped outside into the storm, cloak whipping violently. She caught only a glimpse of what followed, a sudden blur of motion, a flash of steel, and then the wet thud of bodies hitting mud. When he returned, blood streaked his cheek, but his eyes were calm. "It's done," he said simply. Arya stared at him, trembling. "You killed them?" "They were not men who would have shown you mercy," he replied quietly. "I won't apologize for keeping you alive." The way he said you made her heart skip. She didn't understand why. He was a stranger, dangerous, powerful. And yet something inside her trusted him, irrationally, unreasonably. He wiped the blood from his jaw, exhaustion flickering across his face, then leaned against the doorframe. For the first time, the Alpha King looked human. And beneath the fierce power, there was pain. Morning came gray and weeping. Mist hung low over the forest like a shroud, the air cool and damp. The storm had not yet passed, but its fury had dulled. Inside the cabin, Kaelin moved slowly, every motion deliberate. A man used to command but unfamiliar with peace. His boots left faint prints on the wooden floor as he examined her simple home. Shelves lined with herbs, a half-finished painting on the wall, a single vase of dried flowers on the windowsill. "You live far from the world," he said softly. Arya nodded. "That's the point." He turned to her then, and his gaze softened. "Hiding from something?" She met his eyes. "From everything." For a moment, silence filled the small space, the kind that says more than words ever could. Then he spoke, voice low and steady. "I am Kaelin," he said, "king of the Northlands, or at least, I was." Arya froze, the words hanging between them like a spell. "King. My lands are in chaos," he continued, eyes darkening. "My council betrayed me. My generals sold their loyalty for gold. The hunters who came last night were sent to finish what treachery began." He winced slightly as he moved his arm, revealing a gash across his forearm, still raw and bleeding. Arya stepped forward without thinking. "Sit." "It's nothing," he muttered. "It's bleeding," she countered. "And if infection sets in, even kings fall." For a moment, he looked like he might refuse, pride tightening his jaw. But something in her tone left no room for argument. Slowly, he sat by the fire. She cleaned the wound, careful and precise. He watched her, the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the way her hands trembled slightly though she tried to hide it. Her touch was gentle yet firm, and when their skin met, warmth spread through him like a spark. "You're not afraid of me," he said quietly. She didn't look up. "Should I be?" He hesitated. "Most people are." She gave a faint smile. "Then maybe you're not as frightening as you think." He chuckled, a low sound that surprised even him. It was the first genuine laugh he'd given in months. Later, as the day stretched on, they shared a meal in uneasy peace. The rain drummed steadily on the roof, the fire casting long shadows across the walls. "You could leave," she said suddenly. "If they're after you, you shouldn't stay here." Kaelin's gaze locked onto hers. "And leave you unprotected?" She frowned. "You don't even know me." "No," he said, "but I know danger when I see it. And I know courage." She turned away, heart pounding. No one had spoken to her like that in years. She didn't like it, the way his words reached past her defenses. He leaned back, studying her. "You're not from here." She shook her head. "I used to live near the capital. I left after—" She stopped herself. "After what?" He pressed gently. "After love turned into a prison." Her eyes met his, unguarded for the first time. He saw the pain there, the betrayal that still haunted her. Something inside him softened. He knew too well what it meant to be caged, by duty, by blood, by the weight of a crown. "Then we have something in common," he said quietly. Their eyes held, long enough for the fire to crackle between them like the echo of a heartbeat. That night the storm began to fade, leaving only a cold drizzle. Arya lit a candle and sat by the window, unable to sleep. Kaelin stood nearby, silent, watching the forest through the mist. "You should rest," she said softly. "Kings don't rest," he murmured. "Not when their world burns." She looked at him, not the king, not the warrior, but the man beneath it all. And something about the sight broke her heart a little. "Then stay here tonight," she whispered, "just for one night." He turned toward her, expression unreadable. "And if I do, Arya, will you still send me away tomorrow?" She opened her mouth, but no words came, because she didn't know. He stepped closer, not touching, just near enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the quiet strength he carried like a storm contained. "You saved my life," he said softly. "That means something." "It doesn't," she said, though her voice trembled. "You'll leave. They all do." "Not all," he murmured. Lightning flickered far away, a soft pulse of silver across the sky. For a moment, their reflections met in the window, two souls both haunted by what they'd lost, drawn together by something neither could name. And though neither spoke it aloud, they both felt it, the unspoken claim forming between them. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes said enough. A promise, a warning, a beginning. "Sleep, Arya," he said quietly. "Tomorrow will test us both." But long after she lay down, she could still hear him pacing by the fire, a king without a throne, a man without peace. And she knew with a sinking heart that his presence had already changed everything. Because some storms never really pass. They only learn new names. Days slipped quietly through the forest, carrying with them the scent of rain and wood smoke. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered, in the dripping leaves, in the low rumble of distant thunder, and in the two hearts that now shared one fragile refuge. Kaelin lingered. Every morning he told himself he would leave, but every night the forest whispered otherwise. Enemies still roamed beyond the ridge. His scouts had not returned. And somewhere deep within he suspected the truth. It was not only duty that kept him here. Arya's presence unsettled him. Her calm, her defiance, her quiet strength that did not bow, even before a king. She moved through her cottage like a force of nature. Small, soft-spoken, but unyielding. They formed an uneasy alliance. He used her knowledge of the forest to track his enemies' movements. She, in turn, used his power to drive away the hunters that haunted her borders. It should have been simple, a temporary truce. But every shared glance, every accidental touch, eroded the distance between them. "Those men will return," Kaelin said, studying the map spread across her table. "Their tracks lead south, but they'll circle back once they regroup." Arya leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Then you should go before they do." His gaze lifted to hers, a challenge and a warning both. "You would send me out wounded, knowing the danger?" "You've survived worse," she said. "You're a king." "A king without a kingdom," he replied bitterly. Something flickered in her eyes. Pity, perhaps, or understanding. "Then rebuild it," she whispered. "Don't hide here." The words hit him harder than any blade. She spoke truth, but she could not know how deep his wounds ran. Days became a rhythm of tension and quiet companionship. She cooked. He trained in the clearing, sword slicing through morning mist. She watched sometimes, pretending not to. There was grace in the way he moved, strength restrained by discipline, danger softened by loss. One evening, as twilight spread across the trees, she found him sharpening his blade by the fire. "You don't rest," she said. "Rest invites weakness." "Or peace," she murmured. He glanced up. "Peace is for those who have nothing left to lose." She hesitated. "And you?" His eyes met hers. "I have too much." The tension between them grew like a living thing, coiling tighter with each passing day. It wasn't just his presence that unsettled her. It was what it awakened. Memories of promises once made, once broken. She had built these walls to keep the world out. Now, with every look he gave her, the walls cracked a little more. That night, moonlight poured through the window, pale and silver. The fire burned low. Arya stood by the shelf pretending to read, though her hands trembled. She could feel his gaze on her back, steady, unyielding. "You've been avoiding me," he said at last. She turned slowly. "Perhaps because you fill the room like a storm, and yet you keep standing in its path." His tone was neither mocking nor cruel, just true. She crossed her arms. "You command everyone you meet. Do you know any other way?" He rose from his chair, the movement quiet but powerful. "Command is what keeps kingdoms alive, and kills everything else," she shot back. Their words collided, sharp as blades. The air thickened. "You cannot defy me always," he said, stepping closer. I need control, for my people, for my crown. And I need freedom, she replied, voice steady, though her heart raced. You may be king, Kaelin, but not here, not with me. He stopped just a breath away, the candlelight catching the gold in his eyes. You think freedom is won by rebellion? You mistake chaos for strength. No, she said softly. I mistake control for fear. Silence. A slow, dangerous silence that hummed between them. Then he whispered, You are mine, whether you will or no. The words cracked something open in her, not just fear, but pain. Old pain. She jerked away, tears glinting. Don't, she said. Don't make me into something you own. Kaelin froze. The power in his stance faltered, and for the first time, she saw not the Alpha King, but a man haunted by loss. I didn't mean, he began, but she cut him off. Yes, you did. You've been taught that love means possession, that loyalty is chains. But I won't be caged, Kaelin. Not by you. Not by anyone. Her words struck him harder than steel. He turned away, fists clenched, jaw tight, the echo of his own past clawing at him. He had once loved someone who betrayed him. He had once trusted, and it had cost him his throne. Now, standing in her firelight, he understood what frightened him most. Not her defiance, but what it stirred within him. Later that night, she found him outside, standing beneath the cold moon. His cloak billowed gently, his breath visible in the chill. Kaelin, she said softly. He didn't turn. You were right. She stepped closer. About what? Control, he said. It's fear. I've lived my whole life thinking I could hold the world together if I just held it tightly enough. But everything I've gripped has slipped through my fingers. Arya's voice softened. Then maybe, stop gripping so hard. He turned at last. The moonlight painted his face in silver and shadow, beautiful and broken. You should hate me, he murmured. I tried, she whispered. It didn't work. For a moment, neither moved. The night hummed with the rhythm of their hearts, the forest alive around them. Then, from the distance, came the faint crack of a branch, too deliberate to be wind. Both froze. Kaelin's hand went instantly to his sword. His eyes flashed gold again, sharp and alert. They found us, he said. Arya's pulse leapt. Your enemies? He nodded once. Stay inside. Bar the door. No matter what happens, do not come out. Kaelin. Do not come out. He stepped into the darkness, the shadows swallowing him whole. Arya stood at the door, trembling, listening as the forest erupted with the sounds of pursuit. Boots on wet earth, steel meeting steel, a muffled cry. Then, silence. Only the wind. Only the drip of rain from the leaves. She waited. 1 minute, 2, 5, before she could bear it no longer. Grabbing her cloak, she threw open the door. The clearing lay empty, save for a single streak of blood glistening in the moonlight. Kaelin, she whispered into the night. No answer. Only the echo of his last words. Do not come out. Her breath caught, and her heart shattered into the silence. The forest was silent. Too silent. Only the hiss of rain from the leaves and the slow drip of blood staining the roots below. Arya stood in the doorway, frozen, her pulse wild with fear. Kaelin, she whispered again. No answer. Only the whisper of the wind threading through the trees. Then, a sound. A muffled groan. Her eyes darted toward the ridge, where the faintest shimmer of movement caught the moonlight. Without hesitation, she ran. Branches tore at her cloak, roots snatched at her feet, but she didn't stop. Her breath came ragged, her heart hammering a rhythm of terror and hope. At last she found him, on one knee in the clearing, sword in hand, surrounded by bodies. He was bloodied, pale, but alive. Arya, He rasped, voice barely a whisper. "I told you to stay inside." "And let you die?" she cried, dropping beside him. "Never." She tore a strip of fabric from her sleeve, pressing it to a wound across his ribs. He winced, but his gaze never left hers. "More will come," he said. "They always come." "Then we face them," she answered. "Together." A faint, grim smile touched his lips. The first in days. "Together," he echoed. The next morning came with no peace. The air was thick with the smell of battle. Burnt wood, iron, blood. The cottage stood half-ruined, its door hanging askew. Kalen sat by the hearth, shirt torn, shoulder bandaged. His sword lay across his knees. Arya moved quietly around him, gathering the pieces of her shattered home. Neither spoke for a long time. There was too much between them, too many words that had nearly been said, too many that had been swallowed. Finally, she broke the silence. "How did they find us?" His jaw clenched. "Someone in my ranks betrayed me. They sent hunters to finish what politics could not." She looked at him, the exhaustion beneath his eyes, the tension carved into every line of his face. "You fight your enemies like you fight yourself." He turned toward her slowly. "And you think I can stop?" "I think you're tired," she said softly. "Tired of bleeding for people who only take." He didn't answer, but his silence said enough. That night, the wind howled again, though the storm had long passed. Arya found Kalen outside, sitting by the dying embers of a fire. "Why do you never rest?" she asked. "Because the moment I stop fighting, everything I love is taken." Her heart twisted. "You speak as if love and loss are the same thing." He looked up at her, eyes shadowed, voice rough. "They've always been for me." She moved closer. "Then maybe it's time to rewrite that." He frowned slightly. "How?" "By letting someone stand beside you," she said. "Not beneath you." For a long heartbeat, he stared at her, as if weighing every word. Then, in a voice low and unguarded, he said, "I never asked you to submit, Arya." He reached out, taking her hand, rough, trembling, human. "I asked you to fight beside me, to trust me." Her breath caught. His words pierced through every wall she'd built. Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know if I can." "Then let me earn it," he said. In that fragile moment, time stilled. The wind softened, the fire flickered, and the storm that had raged within them for so long finally found a still center. She cupped his face gently, tracing the scar along his cheek. "You carry so many battles," she whispered, "but not all of them are outside you." He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch, not as a king seeking power, but as a man seeking peace. "I will trust you," she said at last, voice shaking, "but never restrict me." He opened his eyes, golden light meeting hers. "I wouldn't dare." She leaned forward then, her lips finding his. It wasn't a kiss of surrender, but of promise, fierce, steady, and real. The fire roared softly beside them, reflecting the heat that burned between two souls who had finally stopped fighting against each other and begun to fight for something greater. But peace, as always, was fleeting. Far beyond the forest's edge, riders gathered, cloaked, armed, and hungry for vengeance. At their lead, a man with eyes as cold as winter and a mark burned into his palm, the sigil of betrayal. "Find the Alpha King," he commanded. "He's weak now. And the woman, bring her alive." The soldiers vanished into the mist. Back at the cottage, Arya rested her head against Kalen's chest, unaware of the storm marching toward them. But Kalen's eyes stayed open, golden, glowing faintly in the dark. He had found something worth protecting, and for that he knew blood would fall again. Weeks turned into months. The storm that had once trapped them in a lonely forest became nothing more than memory, a chapter of chaos that had birthed something extraordinary. Kalen's enemies fell one by one. The traitors were revealed, their plots undone, And through it all, Arya remained, the silent strength at his side, the calm beneath his crown. Together, they rebuilt what had been broken. The Alpha King, once a creature of command, learned patience, learned that power was not control, but harmony. And Arya, once a woman who had fled from the world's cruelty, found purpose in its heart again. "Your people will never accept me," she had said once, watching the soldiers rebuild the walls of his citadel. "Then they will learn," he'd answered, "because I will accept no world that rejects the one who saved me." And in time, they did learn. Whispers of the forest woman who had tamed the Alpha King spread across the Northlands like fire through dry grass. But those who came to see her did not find a woman who knelt before a king. They found a queen who stood beside him. Arya walked through the great halls of the rebuilt palace, sunlight pouring through tall stained glass windows. Servants bowed as she passed, not out of fear, but respect. Every step she took echoed her journey, from solitude to sovereignty, from running to ruling. She found Kaelin in the throne room, reading dispatches from his generals. His armor gleamed, his crown rested beside him on the table, as if even now he wore it reluctantly. "You look too serious for a man whose realm is finally at peace," she teased. He looked up, smiling in that quiet way he reserved only for her. "Peace still requires guardians." "Then rest, my king," she said softly, touching his shoulder. "Even storms need calm skies to remind them why they pass." He caught her hand, kissed her palm gently. "You've given me both storm and calm, Arya, and I wouldn't trade either." That night, the castle was alive with joy. The great hall shimmered with gold and silver, courtiers in fine silks, soldiers in shining mail. It was the night of his coronation renewed, not as a symbol of power, but of restoration. Kaelin stood before his people, tall and steady, wearing the weight of his crown with new meaning. The crowd quieted as he lifted his hand, beckoning Arya forward. She hesitated at first, not from fear, but from disbelief. The girl who had once lived alone among trees now walked beneath banners that bore his crest, her gown whispering like wind through the forest. Kaelin's voice rang clear through the hall. "When I was lost, this woman gave me shelter. When I was hunted, she stood before danger. When I sought to command, she taught me to listen. And when I believed myself broken, she reminded me that a king's strength is nothing without his heart." He turned to her then, eyes glimmering beneath torchlight. "Arya of the forest, will you stand beside me, not as subject or servant, but as partner, as equal, as my queen?" The hall held its breath. Arya lifted her chin, her eyes never leaving his. "I will stand beside you, Kaelin, as long as love means freedom, and loyalty means choice." He smiled, the faintest curve of reverence in his expression. "Then before all the realms I name you my queen." Cheers erupted, the sound rolling like thunder through marble halls. Kaelin took the crown from his head and placed it gently upon hers, not to weigh her down, but to lift her up. In that moment the legends were born. They say the Alpha King found strength not in battle, but in the woman who refused to bow. They say his kingdom flourished because he ruled not with dominance but with devotion. And they say that in the long winters of the north, when snow blanketed the earth and the moon hung full over the palace towers, one could still see them walking side by side through the gardens, hand in hand, equals in heart and in will. The tale would pass through generations, of the king who sought shelter and the woman who could not be restricted. A story of passion and partnership, of love that burned without consuming, of two souls who chose every day not to conquer each other, but to belong to one another. And so ended the legend of Kaelin and Arya, the Alpha King and the woman who taught him that true power lies not in command, but in love that sets you free. The end.